Without any prior warning, Panama Supreme Court issued a ruling declaring that the operating contract for two ports signed with China's CK Hutchison Group unconstitutional and decided to revoke the port's concession rights. It is worth noting that these ports were built up step by CK Hutchison over a period of 30 years, with total investments exceeding $4 billion. Panama's decision makes it hard not to associate it with an American-style $0 grab. And now, retaliation from China has begun to make Panama feel real panic. So what exactly is going on here? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. This is Panama, located on the Central American Isthmus. Costa Rica lies to its west, and Colombia to its east. Whether in terms of land area or population size, Panama is not particularly prominent on a global scale. Fortunately, Panama controls one of the most important shipping routes in the world, the Panama Canal. As far as I know, the Panama Canal is about 80 kilometers long and serves as a crucial maritime passage connecting the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Through this canal, ships traveling between the east and west coasts of the United States no longer need to detour around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America, shortening their voyage by roughly 15,000 kilometers. In fact, today, there are about 180 maritime routes formed around the Panama Canal each year, connecting up to around 170 countries and regions worldwide and reaching nearly 1,920 ports. Data shows that approximately 13,000 vessels pass through the Panama Canal every year, accounting for about 5% to 6% of global maritime shipping volume. The main goods transported through the canal include oil, LNG, grain, containerized cargo, and mineral resources, and the energy transportation of many countries around the world is highly dependent on this waterway. From toll revenues alone, the Panama Canal generates nearly $5 billion annually, with net profits reaching around $3 billion. Therefore, as long as the global maritime shipping system continues to exist, Panama can enjoy a long-term, stable source of income with extremely strong cash flow. It is precisely for this reason that the Panama Canal is often referred to as the accelerator of world trade. But what many people don't realize is that there are actually two Chinese-operated ports in Panama. One is the port of Balboa on the Pacific side, and the other is the Port Cristobal on the Atlantic side. These two ports sit right at the two entrances of the Panama Canal, one at the Pacific entrance, the other at the Caribbean entrance. From a map, they look like a pair of door handles, firmly controlling the canal's entry and exit points. Starting in 1997, China's CK Hutchison Group obtained 25-year concession rights to operate these two ports. The contract also stipulated that upon expiration, the concessions could be automatically renewed for another 25 years, meaning the operating rights could last at least until 2047. At the outset, CK Hutchison's direct investment had already reached $1.5 billion, mainly used for terminal construction, port expansion, equipment upgrades, and system modernization. Later, during the port automation upgrade process, the group invested an additional approximately $2.5 billion, bringing the total cumulative investment to around $4 billion. Within the entire Latin American port system, this scale of investment is extremely rare. After nearly 30 years of operation by CK Hutchison, these two ports now handle an annual throughput of about 8 million TEUs, making them one of the largest port clusters in Central America and the most critical container hubs at both ends of the Panama Canal. At the same time, they have directly created around 9,000 local jobs, with indirect employment reaching tens of thousands more. The port-related taxes and insurance service revenues generated each year have long become an important part of Panama's canal-based economic system. Yet no one expected that Panama would now rule that the port operating contracts signed with China's CK Hutchison Group are unconstitutional and decide to revoke the port concessions. So what exactly is going on? In fact, as early as during Trump's election campaign, he publicly stated on social media that the Panama Canal is an important national asset of the United States. Later, at a press conference in January 2025, when asked whether he would rule out the possibility of using military force to retake the Panama Canal, Trump did not explicitly deny the option. Instead, he once again emphasized the need to regain control over the canal. If this were merely Trump's personal stance, the situation became even more intriguing at the U.S. presidential inauguration. While discussing America's foreign policy and national security strategy, Trump repeatedly brought up the Panama Canal. He not only stressed the need to take back control of the canal, but also deliberately linked the issue to China. In his view, China's port presence in Panama is undermining core U.S. interests. According to Trump's logic, once the United States regains control of the Panama Canal and related port facilities, the U.S. Navy's forces on the east and west coast would be able to support each other in the shortest possible time, representing a major strategic upgrade from a military perspective. At the same time, the United States would also be able to reassert control over the key commercial corridor connecting the two oceans. To advance this objective, the Trump administration also repeatedly applied pressure on Panama behind the scenes. For example, from late 2025 to early 2026, the United States, citing sanctions against Venezuela, seized multiple oil tankers on the high seas that were suspected of transporting Venezuelan crude. Among the 6 vessels detained, 5 were registered under the Panamanian flag. As U.S. public opinion pressure and security pressure continued to rise, signs of political realignment began to appear within Panama itself, eventually shifting toward legal means. Just last year, the Panamanian government filed a lawsuit against CK Hutchison Group on the grounds that the port concessions were not in the national interest, attempting to forcibly reclaim the operating rights to the ports. At the time, however, almost everyone believed this was merely a warning directed at China and that no real action would be taken. That assumption held until January 29th of this year, when Panama Supreme Court issued a ruling declaring that CK Hutchison's leasing and operation of the 2 ports involved constitutional violations. Based on this ruling, the Panamanian government immediately moved to reclaim ownership and operating rights of the 2 ports. The problem is that this decision came with virtually no prior communication and no negotiations over compensation. Judging from the outcome, it looks far more like an American-style $0 grab. After all, these 2 ports were built up step by CK Hutchison over a full 30 years, with cumulative investments exceeding $4 billion, and the concession contract had already been automatically renewed for another 25 years. This move has clearly harmed China's interests, and what comes next is that retaliation from China is now beginning to unfold. As of now, Beijing has moved swiftly to instruct relevant companies to suspend negotiations on new projects with Panama, including freezing projects that are still under discussion and have not yet been signed. This approach does not violate any laws, while still leaving room for future cooperation, but its impact has been immediate. The reason is that most of the projects currently being discussed between Chinese and Panamanian companies are concentrated in port-related logistics, energy, and infrastructure. These types of cooperation are particularly vulnerable to delays. Every extra day of postponement pushes back completion timelines, directly affecting actual revenue as well as social and public welfare. Moreover, Panama itself is a very small economy. Aside from the Panama Canal, it has few other truly competitive pillar industries, and it relies heavily on foreign capital and foreign enterprises. Once these projects are put on hold, they become like open wounds, continuously draining economic vitality. This also represents a form of silent pressure. If the issue remains unresolved for an extended period, a long-term suspension of cooperation by the Chinese side would leave the Panamanian government with only 2 options: either search for new investors or allow the projects to be shelved altogether. Either path would consume a significant amount of time and energy. According to related reports, this move by China has already directly obstructed potential investments in Panama worth tens of billions of US dollars. But this is only the first step in China's countermeasures. Last week, the Chinese government had already issued instructions asking domestic shipping companies to consider rerouting part of their cargo to other ports, provided this could be done without generating significant additional costs. This is not a mandatory ban on Chinese vessels passing through Panama. Rather, when alternative routes are available, companies are encouraged to prioritize those options. In the short term, this measure may not produce obvious changes, but over time, shipping companies will naturally adjust their routes. The cumulative impact will gradually emerge, and the longer it continues, the more pronounced the effect will be. On the surface, this kind of adjustment may not seem to have a major impact on Panama itself, because Panama Canal toll revenues mainly flow into the government's fiscal accounts. However, the key issue is that the canal making money does not necessarily mean that ports and the logistics system are making money. What truly sustains port operations are unloading, storage, refueling, and supporting services, and most of this revenue goes to port operators. A significant portion of these ports are operated by foreign companies. Over time, once a group of long-term, stable Chinese clients is lost, operational pressure on the ports will continue to intensify. If foreign operators choose to withdraw due to declining returns, the Panamanian government itself does not have the capacity to take over and operate so many ports simultaneously. It is important to understand that once container traffic declines, jobs are lost, the number of workers falls, handling efficiency drops, and non-essential vessels will increasingly bypass these ports altogether. The result is a self-reinforcing downward spiral that further weakens port attractiveness. If suspending new projects involving state-owned enterprises is a measure that produces quick results, then this approach is more like a strategy that requires time to ferment, but whose impact continues to expand. And at the same time, China has also begun to move into another area that Panama relies on heavily: agricultural exports. Panama itself is a country that relies heavily on agricultural exports, and naturally a significant portion of its agricultural products enter the Chinese market. Now, the Chinese government has announced that it will strengthen inspections and market access management for goods exported from Panama. This is not a sanction, but rather an upward adjustment of existing standards, such as stricter quarantine requirements, more frequent spot checks, and relatively slower yet fully compliant customs clearance procedures. These measures are all compliant with regulations, but they can nonetheless create a strong sense of pressure for Panama. This is because Panama's main exports to China include bananas, coffee, fruits, and seafood. These products share a common characteristic: short shelf lives and thin profit margins, making them highly sensitive to delays. If a container of fruit is held at a port for an extra week, its quality can deteriorate noticeably, prices will fall accordingly, and in some cases the goods may become unsellable. And since China is an extremely important export market for Panamanian agricultural products, once problems emerge along this chain, the first to bear the pressure are often the farmers themselves. To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.